Hello, Superwomen. On this episode of the Pleasure Principles podcast, we are going to be discussing something that you might not think relates to you. But I would encourage, if you are a superwoman, if my work speaks to you, I promise that this relates to you in some way. In the past, I would have skipped an episode like this, thinking it did not apply to me because I was busy and I had things to do. Today, we're going to talk about the many facets of domestic violence and coercive control, and parts of this episode might be distressing for some listeners. My guest and I, Dr. Kelly Lamoreaux, have an open and honest conversation about domestic violence. And I want to stress to you two things. Number one, domestic violence takes many forms. It's physical abuse and sexual abuse, which is what we most often think of, but it is also emotional and psychological abuse, verbal attacks, threats, humiliation, manipulation, isolation, could be name calling, could be gaslighting. And honestly, there isn't a superwoman that I work with that doesn't have some form of manipulation and gaslighting present in her relationship. Could be economic or financial abuse. So, controlling a person's financial resources, making them dependent or unable to leave their relationship, restricting access to money, spending. There's verbal abuse, that's the insults and name calling, the constant criticism that nothing is ever good enough, no matter what you do. There is digital and cyber abuse, so using technology to stalk, harass, or control someone. And before we begin, and we talk about this again at the end, but I want to let you all know if you or someone that you know is experiencing domestic violence, please know that help is available. So if you are in the US, you can reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, SAFE. That's 7233. And for those in Canada, you can call 1-800-363-9010 or visit sheltersafe.ca for more resources. I want you to take care when listening. Remember that you are not alone, and listen for the elements of violence that apply to your relationship, because even though it might not be domestic violence, it might not be toxic, there are still elements in this relationship that will apply to you or apply to someone that you know. And it is a time that we need to be having these conversations out in the open about coercive control, about bullying, about division between people. And if we can understand and spot these patterns, we can seek help, healing, we can offer support. And I think if the world needed anything right now, it is a full understanding of what coercive control is, how it is playing out at the micro level in relationship, and how it is playing out at the macro level with government and war. Hi, I'm Dr. Jordin. I help high-achieving women who feel unfulfilled and disconnected create more intimacy and joy in their personal lives. We've been taught that doing it all will lead to fulfillment, but it's draining your energy and killing your intimacy. I'm a pleasure and power dynamics expert, author, and naturopathic doctor. I teach women how to reignite their pleasure, reclaim their feminine power, and feel deeply desired and supported, all while staying successful in their careers. Hello, Superwomen. Today I have a very special guest. She's actually a repeat guest on the Pleasure Principles podcast. And today is something that you probably don't think applies to you, but I can almost guarantee that it does. I had my head completely in the sand on this topic, completely unaware. I thought domestic violence, intimate partner violence was something I would never have to worry about, think about, until I found myself in a DV situation. And then it turned out that many of my other clients, many high performing clients, were and have been as well. So really, really want you to pay big attention to this one, because if it's not you, it's your daughters, it's your friends, it's your sister. And yeah, we're gonna bust a lot of myths today. So want to welcome back Dr. Kelly Lamoreaux. Welcome.
I'm so glad to be back here and talking about something that's so important that we've both experienced. And I can't wait for today's conversation. And I always love being on with you, Jordin. You're awesome. So can't wait.
Love you too. I want to interview you more just so we can catch up.
Oh, I know we did. I don't know why we hardly ever talk, but on your podcast.
I know. We're like, we need to do this retreat and we need to do this. And we just so busy doing our thing.
Yeah.
But we're going to make that's a 2025 goal.
I think so. Yeah. We'll have to talk.
I'm feeling it. Yeah. We might have a new direction after today too.
I think so.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about you today, and then we'll go to your story, because I want people to really grasp this happens to anyone.
Okay. So, well, I am a cosmetic dentist, very honored to be voted a top Colorado dentist since 2019. I, didn't grow up with a lot of money, but pursued my doctorate myself and paid for my education. I worked very hard for it. I'm also a mom of 4, and I have a fitness business that I've done. I have a fitness app. I love motivating other women, and I love motivating people and sharing my own life experiences so I can touch their life and show them that they can do things too, and that I've been through hard things, and, share my vulnerability with others.
And she's stunning and a model.
Oh, thank you.
If we want, you were humble. You were humble with that introduction. So aside from being amazing, and we've talked about your story on our other episode, but I want to bring you on to talk about your experience with domestic violence.
Yes.
So we can really start changing the narrative and be having the real conversation that we need to have about this.
And I'm so excited because it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So October is a perfect time.
Perfect time. So tell us what you think people need to hear.
Well, first, I want to start with what you and I have both talked about, that domestic violence can happen to anyone, and it happens to men too. I don't have the statistic in front of me, but it's pretty staggering how common domestic violence is. I am now 46, but in my early 20s, I was in a domestic violence relationship. It started out all peachy. I mean, to me, I have a big heart. I believe in relationships. I was having a good time. And then about a year into the relationship, I had my first incident of being abused. I don't know why I'm choking. Oh boy. I've choked up about this for years, but I think it's because it's such an important topic.
And I know who's listening.
Yeah. And I know people are going through this, because honestly, my situation now, I'm so healed from it. It feels like, oh, did it happen to me? I'm so healed from it. But the first incident of abuse, I got into an argument with my significant other, It got heightened. He chased me down the hall, grabbed me from behind, choked me, threw me on the ground, kicked me, and told me, I literally haven't choked about this so long. He was kicking me and telling me he was going to kill me. And that was the first incident. And let me tell you, I stayed for 5 years. I stayed in that situation for 5 years. And there were bruises, there were other things that happened. And I was a shell of myself. And I was very, I didn't see it till afterwards, but I was isolated. At the time, I joined his religion. So I thought, oh, I'm being isolated from my family because I joined this religion. There was a lot of confusing things. I was isolated from family, friends. My self confidence was completely knocked down slowly over time. I was literally a shell of myself.
Thank you. I'm coming back from the shell. So it's the phases and how much your nervous system remembers is like how, you've done the work, you think you're healed, but
Yeah.
it can still be very, very triggering. So thank you for sharing honestly. And I want to go back a little bit because you said some super important things that I want to point out. So we have a beautiful, brilliant, very capable, very strong woman. Okay. I thought
No.
violence happened to weak people
Mhm.
with people that weren't smart enough to leave.
Yes.
Um,
And that's what everybody says. Like, oh, why didn't she leave the first time? Why did I stay for 5 years? Yeah.
and yes, so I'm actually learning, and there's been a subset of the women that I work with in abusive relationships now, and they're actually selected by the abusers because they have these super traits. And this is research proven. So there's 5 things. I meant to look them up before this call, but life. But it's that very hardworking, very loyal, very willing to excuse things, agreeableness.
Yep. Check,
Um,
check.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. But I'm looking at those list of characteristics and I talk about superwomen all the time. And it's like, that's a superwoman characteristic. That's why she's gotten to so many heights in her career.
Right. Right. All these qualities. Right.
But that is the opposite of public perception.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I don't know how many clients had come to me, and even more so in the earlier days where it's like, I've got a libido problem. Something's wrong with me. I don't know what's wrong with me. Well, there was a 25% chance that that woman was in an abusive relationship.
And it could have just been verbal. This doesn't have to be physical.
Thank you. That was the second point that I wanted to bring up is that, and like you mentioned with Rihanna and Mel B, she has a, have you read her book or her documentary, The Spice Girls?
Oh,
Um, it was free on Audible for a little bit, but it's a great one. She was so open and honest, and it actually, he would drug her and she ended up like using cocaine to cope, but wearing down to the shell, like a shell of yourself, someone that is unrecognizable. And I can imagine what that was like for our families to witness.
yeah, that's it. I think it's, and I did a little podcast clip on this. Towards families, I think they're in such a hard spot because often they will see it and they say something and it's not, their advice is not taken.
Mm.
And um, I want to tell them don't give up, number one, or because what I found my family do is they were scared to get involved because I might go back. And so I felt very alone. They just were like kind of hands off or didn't know. And they know the abuser too. If you're married or whatever, they know the abuser. And often abusers are charming, so they don't always see the side that is
Yeah.
seen.
It looks one way on the outside to the public, and it is a very, very different story behind closed doors.
I I want to say my best friend last year took her own life because of domestic violence from verbal abuse. And so, for all of you that, for anyone listening that has someone in this situation, you need to take it seriously and you don't give up. If they don't listen, you don't stop. You don't. And that's hard, but you might just save their life.
Thank you for saying that, and hitting for me because I have a friend in a situation, and talk to her about it. Talk to her about it with evidence, with proof, and she's cut me out. And it's her birthday soon. Like didn't listen, sided with the abuser. Actually, I think I reached out to you when I saw that story. I was like, "Thank you for
Yes.
saying this," because
Yes.
I didn't know if I did the right thing.
No. And you did. And the thing is, like, it's worse if you don't say anything. And hopefully she'll come around and see eventually and thank you for that.
Yeah, and
And
I
if she,
don't even.
you don't need a thank you,
I need
but
nothing. Just like
no.
we can be good, like we can put that all behind us. But yeah, it's her birthday coming up, and I'm like, oh, do I reach out? Maybe I should. Is it gonna aggravate the abuser that I reach out? Like
It's a tough spot to be in. Very tough.
definitely, which is part of the victim psychology. Okay, so wait, back to one thing. This just, how my beautiful brain is going to work today. So violence does not need to be physical. And more times than not, it doesn't start physical, which is another reason why asking like why didn't she leave makes no sense, because they are charming in the beginning. They have a mask on. That's like, oh, what red flags did you ignore? How much more victim blaming do we want to do? Like honestly, and I used to believe all these things.
I know. It's all over the media. It's
Yeah.
everywhere.
Oh, the language around the Olympian that was murdered. I think she was burnt to death by her partner. And I was seeing it on a bunch of the like femicide, domestic violence accounts where they were, oh, I wish I could remember the wording, but it was something like died due to burning or something. And it was like, she was murdered by her partner. Like the language that they use to protect the perpetrator and sort of blame the victim is shocking.
I feel like too, it's if you have someone you know in a domestic violence situation, you should really dive deep into the psychology of abuse and the cycle of abuse and understanding that. And even if you're in an abusive relationship and you aren't ready to get out or you're stuck, read about it, educate yourself, because it's like Stockholm syndrome where someone who's abducted starts sympathizing with their abductor. It's a whole psychology of how this develops.
Where you're defending the abuser. Yeah, and it's the boiled frog. It's happening over time. So we have somebody that beautiful, intelligent, has the super traits. Then she's not expecting to get into a domestic violence situation. She's just loving, she's trusting, she is, working at something because she's in love. She's in love with a mask that the abuser presented, but nonetheless, like the love bombing. How was the relationship at the beginning for you? Was there a lot of love bombing? What
Yes,
happened?
love bombing like crazy. And then after the abuse, and I remember the first time I was physically attacked, sitting in the dark, just like in shock and just like crying and just not know. I can remember the couch I sat on. I remember it all. But the when the abuse is going on, you're love bombed. I remember just being love bombed. Oh, I'm never going to do this again. And then I'm like, oh, that's the person I fell in love with. That's who I put on a pedestal. That's who I see. Oh, it's just a bad day. And that cycle continues. It's the love bombing, abuse, love bomb abuse.
And they slowly give you less and less love
Yes,
and make you feel more and more insecure and questioning yourself. So they will gaslight you, manipulate
yes,
you, isolate you so that you end up so discombobulated. You feel so alone and you don't even trust your own opinion or intuition.
yes,
They've used like the neurochemicals of the abuse cycle where you are actually addicted or trauma bonded to
yes.
them, right? So that's why if somebody else says like, Kelly, this is abuse, you need to get out, you almost protect your abuser because you're so conditioned to do so. And I want to ask you this because this was another massive misconception for me. And also, I feel horrible because domestic violence screening, which we think of often as like physical abuse or sexual abuse, it should be part of my screening as a primary healthcare provider. Like, this should be something that I'm screening my patients for. Zero education around it, zero. And even more so, coercive control, because I feel like elements of this are very, very common. And coercive control happens before physical violence. And sometimes it never escalates to physical or sexual abuse. It's coercive control, which is still abuse, but
Yes.
it stays like that. But people in coercive controlling situations aren't even aware that it's abuse. They aren't even aware that it's toxic because like it's like the problem that you don't know you have. Like you can't solve it or fix it or see it or take any action against it when it's just your environment. So were there controlling tendencies? Did things happen before it escalated to physical?
I'm so glad you asked this because this is the things that he did to control, and they seem small, but they were not. I remember going to a gas station and he got a soft drink and I went to get one. He's like, oh no, you can't get one. Something as tiny as that, these were the little conditionings that were building up. I would go to buy like a cheap pair of shoes at Walmart. I was like 20 at the time in college. And he's like, no, you cannot buy that. Okay. Like little tiny things of controlling my behavior. And I'm such a loving, giving person that I was like, oh, okay. Not understanding that I was being undermined. So I love that you said this because people are like, oh, like tiniest things that you wouldn't pick up on necessarily, you
Yeah,
know?
because it starts small. If they
Yes.
punch you in the face at the dinner table on the first date, you're going to leave.
Yes.
You're going to leave. Somebody's going to call the police.
Yes. You will be gone. And I'll want to tell a part of my story. So I grew up, I love my dad, but my dad was verbally abusive to a lot to my mom, to us kids also. And he grew up in that environment too. That's another thing we can talk about that often abuse is it's
Cyclical.
like
Hmm.
that. I don't know if you've seen the movie. It stops with us.
Honestly, I've been too triggered to watch it because of my personal situation, but I want to. One of my clients sent me the book too, like a couple years ago, and I couldn't get through it. It was too triggering for me. But
It would be triggering. I think it would. And but that movie is so, it just shows, you watch it and it's showing what she sees and it goes back and shows what really happens. And I'm like, that's
that's
exactly it.
exactly what it is.
I saw it one way going through it. And then after I got out and started healing, I went back over it and was like, that isn't what happened. What this what I put you put your abuser on a pedestal, you see it, you ignore things, and it's part of the psychological process of the abuse.
So there's something called betrayal blindness. I can't remember that's like the Instagram term for it. I can't remember what the clinical term is, but it's actually where like it has to do with the gaslighting and manipulation and whatever. But essentially, your partner could cheat on you and you know they cheated on you. You bring it to their attention, and it's like they gaslight you. No, I didn't, or oh, you weren't having sex with me, so you made me do this, or
Yeah.
this relate like it's all your fault. This relationship is all your fault. Blah blah blah. You're the one with the issues. But the victim will be like, oh yeah, like that didn't happen. Oh, I'm sure they didn't. Like I'll believe them. Or like, oh, this was me. Like
Oh,
you just
absolutely.
get so blind to what's happened to you.
Yep.
And for me, that was a bit of a survival mechanism, right?
Hmm.
Because in order to stay in that environment and stay in that boiling water, you have to kind of deny to yourself the magnitude of it. And I'm also not blaming or shaming women who stay, because
Never.
something else that I wanted to talk about is post separation abuse and how, and I don't know if this was the case for you. We're winging this one. Like we don't have a script. Um, but I was also under the misconception that abuse stopped when you left the relationship. But if you look at the research and you look at the facts, you are actually at a higher risk of abuse. The abuse escalates after you leave.
Oh, yeah, because they're not in control of you anymore. They don't like that.
Exactly. Exactly. The whole point of abuse is control, power and control in a non-consensual, non-fun kind of way. Because
Yes.
we talk about like BDSM and power dynamics and everything is like fun and
Fine.
spicy
Yeah.
and like how
Yeah.
to,
Whatever anyone wants to. That's a whole different thing.
that's consensual and that's a very different thing. So did the abuse escalate after you left, after you broke up?
So for me, it did in a way that my abuser downplayed. He said, I don't know why she left. She just left one day.
The victim, they play the victim.
Oh, she's just left me and I have nothing. And I'm just so, that's how mine went. Thankfully, I was not stalked or, a lot of women are.
Monitored. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So thankfully that he just played the victim, that I made it up and this was that. And so for me, that did not happen. Thank goodness. I'm grateful for that. It might have been too, I was living with my brother-in-law who was in law enforcement. So that was helpful.
Okay. I think so. Well, and it's so if victims aren't believed, right? If it's, and
Yes.
did you call the police any of these times that you were abused?
I never did. And you need to, because you need to document, especially if you're married, you need to document your abuse. I do want to bring something up that happened to me from a religious, um, when I left the church I was in, the bishop of the church called me and basically I went through counseling too and all this stuff. We went through marriage, like all the counseling, but the bishop from the church called me and said, hey, you should give him another chance. You need to work this out.
Whoa.
Yes. I'm no longer a member of that church.
Thank goodness. Oh,
Victim downplaying. He was friends with the parents of my ex. I remember being absolutely blown away. Like, oh, you were kicked, but he might have gotten a different story, but I don't think so. I told the parents everything, but it's like, really, really, because Mary, like really.
yeah. You work it out. You stay no matter what.
You do not. Anyone listening, you do not. And God, whatever, would not want you to stay. That is some absolute, that is not love. And I think I went into this relationship not having a healthy relationships were not modeled to me, so I didn't know how to recognize toxic behaviors. And I have a big heart and I'm a giving, caring, loyal person,
You've got super traits. You're a superwoman.
and that was a perfect setup for what I was put into, the situation I was put into. Yeah.
And if you are listening and you are in an abusive relationship, I think I think probably the majority of my listeners, they're in like some toxic relationships, or there's some of these coercive controlling dynamics. And because they have super traits, they're putting up with them. We're not saying leave right away. Sometimes we need to be strategic, right? You need the correct support and be strategic about leaving. Because as we mentioned,
Absolutely.
your risk is actually increased if you do leave. So we need to be a little strategic about it. And also I've seen some, okay, and this wouldn't be with an abuser unwilling to get help. Okay. Like that's the thing.
Yes. And I wish if there are abusers listening to this, like they were most likely abused, you can change. You can change and you need help. I mean, I
Yeah.
think some parts can't change and won't change, but be willing to change. Break
I've
their heart.
seen, yeah, I've seen some like very toxic relationships to the point where I'm like, ugh, like, does she need out of this one? Have miraculous healing,
Yes.
but it requires support, and it requires even support beyond what like
Yes.
my coaching and in my programs, like the therapy that they are doing.
Here's another thing I think we should talk about too. I think some women stay though saying he will change. I think this is important because they're like, oh, he can change. But if he's or he or she, if they're not taking the steps to actually change, they're not going to.
Right. We need to look at actions, not words.
Yeah. We always think we can change people. We can't always. So, yeah.
And that's again, that's the super traits. It's like, I can change this. I can walk on eggshells. I can pretzel myself. I can ask a certain way, or, oh, I listened to this podcast about attachment. And like, if we can just fix his attachment style or fix his ADHD, or he had trauma as a child. And like all of that or some of that could also be true. But if they are not taking any action to heal, that's when we've got a problem.
Right.
So we have it doesn't follow the narrative that we think it, or we're taught that violence looks like. It
Yes.
happens to all sorts of women and men.
Yes. All
Statistically,
walks.
many more women than men, but this is abuse, coercive control. This is a thing. It happens. And I think kind of the last thing that I would want to say is, and this is Giselle Lamoreaux. If I'm saying it incorrectly,
Yeah.
the woman in France who is going through a trial right now. And she said, I think so perfectly, shame has to change sides. And she chose to have the videos of her abuse shown in open court, which I think is just so badass because I don't know about you, but even in my situation, I had so much shame around it. Like I was still blaming myself. I
Yes.
was the victim and I was blaming myself when all we did was love and trust and try and be open hearted. And if something didn't work, we tried another way.
Yeah. We didn't cause this to come upon ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with you. The abuser will say it's your fault. You did this. You made me this way.
Mm,
It's not
right.
true.
Yes. No,
Yeah.
you were targeted and intentionally pulled into an abuse cycle that you didn't consent to. And it's nothing that you did wrong as the
Yeah.
victim.
And I think this is why I promised myself I would always share my story, and I do on my platforms and be vulnerable with it because I know it's impactful to tell. It's like that, me too. And it gives other women strength. And I want, them to know that there is a life after abuse and it's beautiful. The path to get there is rough sometimes, but there's a beautiful life after abuse. And look at all of us that are sharing our stories that have gone through it, all walks of life, successful, this, that, it happens.
And you might feel alone, very alone, but you are not alone. There is so much support around you and available to you.
Yes. I think I told you I went on some support groups online and heard women's story. And that's what just strangers, and some of them are anonymous, that really helped me know I wasn't alone. That there's others like me.
Yeah. You're not alone and it's not your fault.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on that note, I want to say, first of all, thank you so much for sharing so vulnerably, because it is important that we see powerful women talking openly about this. And we're starting to see that a lot more. And I also want to say, I love, do you have Gucci boots or Prada boots that I see you in all the time? And your ex told you couldn't buy like a cheap pair of shoes. So fuck that guy.
Look like Fendi boots now.
Yeah. Exactly. I just find, because I could just remember seeing on your stories, I'm like, yes, girl. She's got the boots.
I just bought myself my own soft drink. I'm going to buy 10 of them.
Okay. And we're laughing, but like, this is real. Yeah, this is real. And sometimes when you're in it, like with the betrayal blindness or looking back at things, and sometimes I have to laugh so that I can get through it and process it and bring like a levity to it and be able to detach a little bit. But
yes, because the healing is hard. I've been there and it's so hard, but it's everyone can do this and it's going to be worth it. Yes. And you're not alone.
Not alone. You can
send me or reach out to me.
That's what I was just going to say. Send me a DM, send Kelly a DM.
If you have a loved one or you just need some support, reach out, because I'm here to help other people in my life. So
same.
And I think we went through this so I think we go through experiences sometimes. I've gone through some horrible ones I don't want to go through, but it's so I can help other people go through the same.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes we help other people walk the path that we had to, and we try and do it make them a little less blind and a little more supportive. So yes, please feel free to reach out to either of us. We'd be happy to chat.
Yes.
And my last thing, I just stop saying there's two sides to every story. That's my last thing. When people break up, don't say there's two sides to every story. And often the person that is out in the streets playing the victim, crying their victim story to everyone, is usually the perpetrator and the abuser. The victim is so discombobulated, so a shell, so boiled that they can barely brush their teeth every day. They are not out spinning some narrative about what happened. They're just trying to overcome the trauma that has happened to them.
And we need to believe the ones that were abused. We need to believe the victims.
Believe the victims.
The victims.
Ooh, one more. Sorry, we're rapid firing at the end here. One more. What was I going to say? Oh, if you are silent or not picking a side, you side with the abuser.
100%.
So just remember that. Like I used to think like, oh, I'm not going to get involved, or that's their drama, that's their mess, whatever. If you are not picking a side or you are not getting involved, you are siding with the abuser. And that is your choice, but just know what you're doing.
Yes. And that with my best friend, that is hitting home. So, yep. You need to believe the victim from the beginning and work it out as you go. But yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Kelly. Thank you for sharing so openly, and loved having you back. Retreat planning 2025.
We are, you guys. Yes. Dr. Wiggins, we're going to do a retreat. We're doing it. And yes, we're doing it. So
Yeah, and we'll let you know. We'll let you know those dates.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Glad to be on. Have a good day.
Have a great week, everybody. If you like what you heard in this episode, leave me a rating. Your support helps me get discovered by more women like you. Together, we can change the conversation around women's sexual health and pleasure for you, your partners, and generations to come.